Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
All right, welcome back to Pasture Prime Time. Pasture Prime Time is a Grow Renaissance series where we're sharing stories from the front lines of food, farming, and regeneration. Today, we're joined by Sean Ortiz from EcoGem. Sean has a background in agriculture. He's an entrepreneur by trade and really invested in continuing to improve soil health, functional systems, bringing nature-based solutions back into the farmers' hands vis-a-vis EcoGem, which is a wonderful product that I certainly stand behind myself, having had some time to work in the gypsum market space. So Sean, it's a great privilege to have you here. I know you and I have been chatting for some months now about different projects in the field and all the stuff that's going on in agriculture. But for our audience, I think it would be wonderful if you shared with us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up at EcoGem.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, and it's definitely exciting to finally join the pod. So I appreciate you taking the time to connect. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I have a background in mechanical engineering. And while I was at TU, actually, me and a couple other engineering friends, we actually started a venture around growing microalgae. And so we found out that the best use of microalgae actually is as a soil amendment and is incredible in improving soil health and productivity. And so that's where I got bit by the regenerative agricultural bug, if you will, and have been diving in headfirst and just really focused on regenerative ag and innovation in the space. Since our microalgae venture, I also founded a farm. We are One Farms, and that just serves as a venue for me to test new ideas and test some of these regenerative concepts and actually put that regenerative practices into motion. And so started that in 2019, and then just this past year, in June of last year, I joined EcoGem and started helping them bring their mineral portfolio to market in agriculture. And that's starting with their largest supply mineral, which is calcium sulfate dihydrates or agricultural gypsum. And so that's what I've been doing for the past year, is helping them to go to market and connecting with folks like yourself with good supply of high quality gypsum.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I didn't realize actually the extent of the portfolio that EcoGem actually has. So let's back up a little bit. One, maybe you can share just, I'm a bit familiar, but I always like to hear it from other people. The difference between mine gypsum, your gypsum source. There's also gypsum that comes from wet scrubbers and the LG&E circuit as well. And so different forms of how we can acquire agriculture gypsum or gypsum used for agriculture purposes. But maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the benefits of your supply and why you're bringing that into your portfolio and taking it to market.
Yeah, absolutely. So gypsum it's a naturally formed mineral. It is calcium sulfate. There's actually two forms. There's anhydrite and dihydrate. So in terms of quality and for ag purposes, you're looking for the dihydrate form. And that's because those two extra water molecules make the calcium and the sulfur much more water soluble. And so that makes it plant available and bioavailable, and is also the reason for a lot of the benefits that we see in terms of soil structure and synergy with biologicals. And so calcium sulfate dihydrate forms naturally. So it is organic, it's OMRI certified organic, but it's not, it has deposits in the Earth's crust. And so the highest quality, if you could imagine, really forms in hot and dry climates. And so our claims are in northern Arizona, southern Utah, right across the border. And so it's just right in that perfect area for high quality, high purity calcium sulfate dihydrate form of gypsum to form naturally. And so the way that we differentiate, one is around our service offering and how we take care of our customers, but also two is in the quality. And that is really, not something that you can control. You just need to find a good source. And so our deposits are extremely high purity.
That's amazing. I guess one
Yeah.
of the things I've always loved about agriculture gypsum, and you and I have talked about this a little bit to dive into some of the soil science maybe, is gypsum and SO4 2H2O in particular has a lot of calcium. And calcium, as we know, is wonderful for leaf and root development, plant cell walls. Really, that's calcium is king when we look at the nutrient cycle. I always say,
Yep.
and I can never imagine a better source than what we can do with gypsum because of its capabilities to bring calcium at a fast rate. And I always talk about the fact that when we think about regenerative agriculture, the end goal is regeneration. We reestablish soil functionality. We're rebuilding topsoil that we've degraded, and we will have less need for inputs. But right now, we're in this cycle where we need to really help the soils get there. And so when I look at the mineral portfolio that you have, in particular, the dihydrate that we're talking about, the gypsum, um, and the fact that it has such a high calcium component to it, it really is that bridge product that is helping us move towards a regenerative state. For me, I'm one, and I don't know about you, Sean, but I think we're in a process of rehabilitation. We're not even into restorative nature yet, and we're certainly not at the regenerative side, but we're rehabilitating the soils. And so these products are not only necessary, but they're absolutely important or imperative if we really are going to start to create some better understanding of how to rebuild the soils. Get away from the yields and the plants and the crops that we're trying to grow on that. Just think about the one piece that we need to continue to focus on. How do we rebuild the soils? Well, we have to rehabilitate it first, and then we have to restore it so it can start to regenerate. And that's the easy button. When it's regenerating, and we've got the microbiology, we've got the nutrient cycles going on effectively, then we're in a spot that we can really start focusing on other areas. But we're a long way from that at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think that's honestly one of the best applications of gypsum. And I think it's a huge use case is for that transition. I recommend folks for transitioning to no-till specifically to utilize gypsum. And one of the other use cases is actually for land remediation. So there's a lot of benefits in terms of remediating land. So I resonate a lot with this rehabilitation remediation step of the soil currently. And I think things like gypsum, zeolite are going to be huge tools, and they're sourced here, and they're American. And I think it's going to be a huge boost to the American farmer and to the American economy.
Yeah. Some of the other things that I really get jazzed about, particularly with your gypsum, being another component that we talk a lot about, but we talk about it in different forms of sulfur. The sulfur component that comes in gypsum and its capability in terms of protein formation being a big one. And so we really do need to think about, we don't talk about that in soil structure and functional soil health enough, a lot for the plants, enzyme activity, and so we've got one product that's got, calcium is king in terms of a nutrient. We've got an ability to bring sulfur that's going to help with that protein enzyme. And one area, and this is plant specific, is chlorophyll reproduction or chlorophyll production, I guess, not reproduction. And that really is going to allow for more root uptake of other nutrients. It's going to allow for that functionality to have healthy, nutritious crops. So we're not chasing yield, but we are chasing crop functionality and crop nutrition. So really excited. Let's maybe get away from the soil plants for a moment. I'd like to take a step back. I'd love to hear from your perspective some of the things that are going well in agriculture. You're getting really ingrained in some of the different bioregions around America in particular. What are the things you're seeing that are going well?
I think that things are moving in the right direction. And I see the wind behind the sails in terms of, everybody's really getting on board with the move and transition to more regenerative practices. And that really is foundationally about
Can I
efficiency. Mike, I'm sorry.
can I stop you there?
Yeah.
I'd love just embedded within that. What is your definition of regenerative agriculture? Sean's definition.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say producing in a way that is continuously beneficial, that is continuously adding and not taking away, is continuously regenerating, um,
Okay.
versus creating the definition around anything else. I think that's something that's quantifiable, and I think that's something that everybody can get behind. And the question would be then, what are the metrics that define that? And I think, a lot of what we've been doing, kind of the bleeding edge of soil health, is quantifying those things and seeing,
Right.
how do we measure soil health and quantify this so that we can, start to project and move in a direction that is continuously creating a better, higher quality, more productive soil that ultimately has multiple benefits beyond just yield. Has benefits to human health, to plant and ecosystem health. And so we see this kind of triple bottom line and this compounding benefits to having a fully functioning and thriving natural ecosystem.
Amazing. I appreciate that. Sorry to derail you there, but I'm always
No, of
interested
course.
in people's
I
take
think
on
that's honestly one of the most important things to talk about,
it. Yeah.
because I think a lot of that does get lost and glossed over,
Mhm.
and it can be misinterpreted. And I think a lot of people have different definitions. Um,
Totally.
but I do like that things are moving in that direction. When we had started our microalgae company, it's a little bit over 10 years ago, or it's about 10 years ago. Um, this it was a movement, but it was not nearly um, as involved as people have been. I think a lot of documentaries, a lot of the collective mind share of folks, farmers getting behind this and seeing results, is moving things in a positive direction. So a long-winded way to answer your question is that I think we are moving in a positive direction with regards to how we cultivate and using more biologicals and starting to innovate there, because I think that's where we're going to start to see real improvements in efficiencies, um, especially since a lot of these things can be produced locally here. Things like
Right.
gypsum that we're just mining here naturally, and avoid kind of the supply chain logistics issues that seem to be kind of plaguing not only ag for import export, but for inputs. And that is something that we're seeing too from a gypsum perspective, is that traditional fertilizers, specifically sulfate fertilizers with tariffs, are now increasing in price significantly. And so now, as you mentioned, sulfur, for a good sulfur source, gypsum is now becoming a better option. And so we're seeing that start to get built into the fertilizer blending plants, where folks are going to just be using more gypsum versus a
Mhm.
chemical based fertilizer, which I think is
Mhm.
going to be net good for the farmers, net good for the earth and for the soil. And so I'm happy to see that, but I didn't think it had
Yeah.
to take the supply chain shakeup to move things in that direction.
Yeah.
But I'm bullish on that. I'm bullish on American production of biologicals, and I'm bullish on American minerals and folks using more things and producing more things on site, like compost.
Love it. I love it. I'm going to ask the converse question, of course, because it behooves me to. We've talked about the things that are going well. Some of the things that you're seeing as positive, that are setting the wind behind the sails in the direction that agriculture needs to go. Where are some of the gaps and deltas? What are some of the things that aren't working as well from your perspective?
I would say go to markets, and supply chain. And this is something that I've been really learning a ton about. The ag supply chain is so established, um,
Mhm.
but it's hard to break into. There's just massive volumes of things that are moving. Um, putting out hundreds of thousands of tons of fertilizer, putting out hundreds of thousands of tons of gypsum. Um, it's difficult. It is logistically difficult to do. And I think that there can be efficiencies in how this and how a product gets to the end customer. And so that's one thing that we're trying to innovate on, as well as our path to market and how we actually get to our consumer, and
Mhm.
doing more things direct to consumer and not going through the traditional supply chain. Um, well, we do both, and we interface with multiple different customers. One thing that we are excited about is the ability to directly reach our customer, especially with things like
Mm-hmm.
omni-channel digital marketing now. Um, More and more farmers becoming more digitally native. We're excited to, increase efficiencies in terms of reaching and connecting with our customers.
Yeah. You mentioned a term there, more technology native. Where do you see technology playing a part or a role in what you're doing, or maybe the larger picture of what agriculture farmers are doing, or even the supply chain? Where does that word technology fit in from your perspective, and how is it actually making a difference?
Totally. This is probably like one of the most exciting things I would say about agriculture is this introduction of technology, and I think that's right where Grow United fits, and something that we're excited about, and in interacting and partnering with you guys. And there's so much that hasn't even been conceived, but um, yeah, I think there's so much that technology can do from a farming perspective. Starting with soil analytics and just data in general. Data ends up driving all of the decisions that we're making, and so some of the best producers that we've seen are adopting these platforms so that they have optics on everything. Something we can borrow from controlled environment agriculture is, how can we take that same approach to large scale field agriculture? And groups like Phytech, um, groups like Earth Optics, a lot of folks are really creating amazing tools, and um, I'm excited about farmers embracing them and adopting them more and more. But I think it's going to be a kind of like a Pokédex, kind of like a farmer's almanac digitally. And I think
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to play a huge part. There's going to be an IoT component with bringing some of these sensors and data on chain, and I think there's a blockchain component in terms of being able to transact and to work with your suppliers, as well as um, pay your bills. So I really think that technology is going to be at the core of everything that, that farmers do. And one of the most exciting things about this too is IoT and robotics, in terms of being able to completely transform the labor aspect. It's something I see a ton of really interesting IoT in. Um, but yeah, what a time to be alive. The technology is starting to really start to evolve quickly, and it's incredibly helpful to the farmers. Um, I
Yeah.
think it's going to
Do,
make
do,
their
you,
job so much easier.
do you think there's a fear from farmers around all this technology and all this data and all this new knowledge base that they have to gain, or do you see it as just another path that they're embracing, whether it's for resiliency in their own financial plans, or whether it's for you know enabling or bringing back the younger generation into agriculture? Where do you think that stands from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think where I see a lot of producers embracing is the information on regenerative agriculture and transitioning to more regenerative practices. I think that they embrace that a lot because it's intuitive. It's things that they've known, things that they've kind of known over the years and can see, but doesn't necessarily have the technology component. I do agree with you that some producers have been a little bit hesitant to adopting
Mm-hmm.
technology. Also, it can be kind of onerous with the amount of platforms, and I feel like there's yet to be somebody that kind of has the holy grail, or the one stop shop that makes it simple and easy versus having a bunch of siloed systems. Um, and so I think a lot of that is getting fleshed out in terms of what's going to be, that one platform that everybody adopts and uses. But I think that folks are eager. People want the benefits of utilizing technology and being able to accomplish more and achieve more with less. And I think those are the comforts and luxuries that technology is going to provide. So I think naturally those things are going to be easily adopted, um, because folks want the results. Folks want to be able to automate and to be able to, um, very quickly do a lot of their transactions or do accounting. A lot of these things that were onerous and would take a ton of time, and producers just don't have time. So I think a
Yeah,
lot of these are just going to get adopted by default, so that folks can manage more and produce more.
excellent, excellent. I'd love to hear a bit about your own farm. We talked about EcoGem, your path there, some of the broader pictures, but tell me why and that entrepreneurial spirit to spin up your own farming practice, and share a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a background after I left CU, when we were doing our microalgae soil amendment company. We started engaging and working in the licensed cannabis space. And so I've consulted there for quite a while. And so I had quite a bit of cannabis experience, since 2013. And so when I was looking at getting something and kind of having a venue to play around and to leverage my experience, I landed on hemp as being kind of that nascent new crop, um,
Hmm.
that I have a ton of experience in, and that I have built a good network. And so I decided to start there. It was 2019, so it was literally kind of the gold rush of the hemp space. And so it was probably the worst year to get started. Um, but yeah, I have it's one of my favorite plants. I love the hemp plant. I think it has an amazing potential, not only from an industrial perspective, but also from a medicine and food perspective. It's literally one of the most useful plants in the planet. It's been cultivated. It's the oldest cultivated plant, um, in history, to my understanding, and it's been with us for a long time. And I think that's for good reason. And I think the stigma of it is starting to fade as people start to realize the history, even just with America, of the hemp plant and how it has played a role in
Hmm.
the entire history of America.
Hmm.
The second Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. And
Right.
so I really see hemp being as a resurgence of American manufacturing and American agriculture. And I'm excited about the potential from a pharmaceutical standpoint, from a medicine standpoint, a food standpoint, as well as an industrial standpoint. And the rubber is really just starting to meet the road when it comes to some of the industrial applications of hemp fiber and hemp and
Yeah.
the different things that you can make with that. So I think we are just in kind of the first few innings in terms of seeing how this actually gets implemented into our society. But I think with all of the corn and soy that was produced this year, and the issues that we're having around supply and demand, and the issues that we're having with exports, to other countries, I think it's just highlighting the issues of monocrop agriculture and
Hmm.
highlighting the need for more crops. And I really think that hemp could be one of those crops that could be inserted into the rotation. It can be kind of cultivated all across the United States and has these kind of foundational benefits that can be applied to multiple different sectors if we can embrace it from an industrial standpoint, which we just
And so
finally
when
are.
just
Yeah.
for the audience's sake, when you're talking industrial, you're actually talking biophilic products. So hempcrete, fiberboard,
Yep.
paper, as you mentioned. There's the textile industry, where we can make clothing. One of the things that comes up often with hemp is the actually I should say this. One of the things that defines a crop that really is substantiated, whether it's a commodity or just a very desired crop, is that equipment is built around it. You can think of cotton, we've got specific harvesters built around that. We've got specific harvesters for sunflower heads. We've got specific harvesters for corn versus wheat. And when we get to hemp, particularly in the outdoor arable cropping setup, we don't have a specific instrument. We're using our tools that we already have for other crops, and we've used that as a gauge, or at least a lot of people I think use that as a gauge, to say that
Yeah.
this crop is something that's going to be brought into my rotation. Maybe you can talk a little bit to that and from your perspective, and how you see that rolling out.
Totally. Yeah, I think that is something that's incredibly exciting too, just from a design and engineering standpoint. There are some companies that have started to look at those issues, but then you have the chicken and the egg. It's like, am I building something for for something that's going to be around for a while, or should I be building a tool for this industry?
Mm.
And it intimately as a Canadian. You guys have been cultivating hemp for the longest. And so, yeah, I'm excited about the potential for new products to be developed around hemp cultivation. We can borrow quite a bit in terms of planting, just from vegetable production.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of crossover there, but I think the harvesting piece is where the issues lie in terms
Mm-hmm.
of this being somewhat of a unique crop. But it just depends what
Mm-hmm.
you're cultivating for. Folks who are cultivating for fiber and for industrial purposes would just sickle mow and just mow it down
Mm-hmm.
and then bale it, um, as opposed to if you're after the seeds because you're going to either make like a protein meal, or you're going to make, or you just want seed for propagation, then you're going to have a different harvester. In that case, it'll be much more similar to a wheat harvester to
Mm-hmm.
pull off the seeds.
So one of the
And then
things that I've run into quite a bit is there's some machinery starting to come out. One of the reasons people like to plant hemp in particular on arable fields, it's got a great carbon drawdown, in terms of its ability to help rehabilitate the soils. We go back to the beginning of our conversation. So it's terrific on that end. It's got some nitrogen issues. When we think about the cycling of nitrogen in the soils, it's not as immune to pests and diseases that people have indicated. Corn earworm is still a major issue. Aphids are still a major issue for hemp. But I think the biggest thing that gets me is when you actually do the model for a crop that has been promoted as a carbon beneficial crop. You kind of have to stay within that 150 kilometer radius from field to decortication or processor. Call that, so what is that, like 94 miles, 150
Yep.
kilometers, somewhere in that, to make it worthwhile or to pan out economically. And that's usually where I start. I start with farmers when we're talking about how do we build resiliency. It's how do we find the elasticity in your financial model, and how far are we actually moving from field to supply chain, whatever that may look like. Could be direct to consumer or otherwise. But that's a fairly limiting factor when we think about the functionality of hemp, and how much hemp could be grown in that concentric circle of growth to really make it worthwhile, because there's not enough decortication plants.
Yep.
One could say, very similar to seed processing mills facilities. We need more of them. Maybe a great opportunity to open up the decentralization of what's going on right now. There's fairly few, and it's fairly centralized. Do you think this is a reason why it hasn't spread like wildfire? Because there's limitations on just the economic benefit outside of the environmental. Just looking at your ability to create that financial neutrality, or actually capture the carbon benefits in the soil, as it were, in terms of your whole we call it scope or CI scoring reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I agree with you a lot. I think it's a chicken and the egg. Farmers want a new crop, but they don't have a market to sell it into yet, and that's
Mm-hmm.
around these products haven't really gotten fully fleshed out and built into the market, and then fully demanded on the home side. Say, for instance, for like
Mm-hmm.
hempcrete to build homes or to build blocks. And so a lot of those things are now just getting a whole bunch more traction. So I'm expecting these things to change, but I think that could be a huge a huge investment from an American perspective in American industry is to bring that manufacturing back onshore, um, and start to build an industry for that here locally. Because I think hemp as a textile, cotton as a textile, hemp as an industrial um, material could help us out so much. Helping to replace some timber, reducing the amount of trees that we have to cut, creating that into a 1 year plant that matures in 90 days
Mm.
and captures incredible amounts of carbon and
Mm.
benefits the soil ecosystem
Mm.
with its roots, and also doesn't require any herbicide or pesticide. It's like an
So
agronomic miracle.
where does gypsum come in the benefit to hemp?
I think gypsum is just foundationally beneficial across all categories. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we I like it here in Colorado because here in Colorado we have pretty heavy clays, and so one of the best ways that it's been used here is for breaking up heavy clays and managing sodicity, specifically in heavy clay sodic soils.
Mm-hmm.
And so areas like the San Luis Valley of Colorado, where they have a shallow water table, they're going to be constantly adding quite a bit of salt to the soil. And so um, that area particularly is also the second highest producing area of potatoes in the nation. And so root
So
crop,
specifically talk about hemp. So where does gypsum come in with hemp? Like there's the soil quality, and certainly there's benefits with gypsum to a lot of other crops. But just to make sure we have continuity there to continue that thought, you might have been coming back around to this and sort of jump in.
yeah,
But
yeah. No,
where does it benefit hemp?
of course. Yeah, so I was just highlighting, potatoes because of the need for the soil structure improvements, which is the same as hemp essentially, and the same
Okay,
for a lot of the benefits
great.
across all
Yeah.
crops. Um, but yeah, gypsum is very beneficial for soil structure improvements, and that is around this, managing sodicity and flocculating clays. So
Mm-hmm.
when the soluble calcium and soluble sulfur enter into the soil profile, the first thing that soluble calcium is going to do is going to go and it's going to start to flocculate clay particles. So it's going to get all of these clays and cause them to flocculate and to bind up. And so that creates much better soil structure. So it'll open up holes for air and holes for water. And so that's why we see this improvement in water infiltration, as well as improvement
Mm-hmm.
in water holding capacity. Um, but also, this is the perfect environment for biology to thrive. And so we see this synergy across all of all of ag in general, because everything is based on biological processes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say that those are really the main benefits um, of in that regard is benefiting the soil structure, which is huge for seed emergence, um, water infiltration, improving your water irrigation efficiency. So you see kind of all a compounding kind of foundational benefit from an agronomic perspective, but it's really
Right.
based in these improvements to soil structure because
Yeah.
of the salt and calcium.
Yeah, I mean, salt reduction, nutrient balance, sulfur supply, calcium supply, soil structure, as you mentioned. I think those are sort of like the key factors for plant and soil connectivity that we need to be focusing on. And certainly, I'm a big fan of what gypsum can do to hemp, with hemp, and many other crops, as you mentioned, potatoes and otherwise. That's
Yeah,
terrific. Let's talk a little bit about, and thank you for sharing your story about spinning up your own farm and your journey through hemp and where that's going. Like you, I think
of course.
anytime we can bring biophilic opportunities to the market space and diversify our current needs on any other one specific crop, call it lumber in this case, it creates opportunity for resiliency and an opportunity to shake up the industry. But
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about some of the things that um, you're noticing from the farm gate. You're speaking with a lot of farmers. Um, just as a generic, what are the things that you're hearing that they're concerned with today? With all the changes and all the constraints and pressures and market shifts. Maybe even as specific as your bioregion, Colorado. What are you hearing around there from farmers that would be interesting to share with our audience?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, mostly around export markets for grain, and also rising input costs, I would say. Um, commodity prices are pretty much exactly where they were. Meanwhile, all of your input costs are 20-30% more expensive. So
Mm-hmm.
the math isn't mathing there, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think some things are going to break. I don't know. I'm seeing kind of mixed reports on kind of how the corn's going to come back. I know we planted record volume in terms of corn, in terms of acres, and so I'm seeing some indications of rust in the corn belt, and so some folks, it seems like, did not get as good of a yield. So hopefully that adds some relief and brings the price of corn up a little bit. Um, but yeah, farmers need some relief somewhere, and
Mm.
so
And where do you
so
think they can find some of that? What are some of the levers that they can pull from your perspective?
totally. And this brings us full circle to the regenerative ag discussion, because that's really how I see regenerative agriculture. It's, how can I be as efficient as possible and produce as
Mm-hmm.
much as I can on site in
Mm-hmm.
terms of nutrients. And so doing things like composting on site, um, doing things like cultivating microalgae on sites, doing things like producing your own compost teas, anything that you can do to maximize the photosynthetic capture ability of your land and turn that into organic matter that you can then return back to the field in the most efficient way. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
like, in operating with that kind of perspective, you can reduce your costs as much as possible, and then recruit as many free workers as you possibly can, which are biology. We're just sitting there working day and night, to convert organic matter into nutrients for free. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's what I would be doing, and that's what I am doing. And we're at least focusing on is just being as efficient as possible, and a lot of these things you can do on site,
Mm-hmm.
and leverage these gifts that God gave us to be
Mm-hmm.
as efficient
Mm-hmm.
as possible.
So really, that paradigm shift on farming a little bit different from the typical process that will create some of that diversification on your balance sheet, which will allow some elasticity for us to change in a greater capacity the different infrastructure needs that are necessary to start making those shifts in a greater way.
Absolutely. Yep. and
Okay.
and
Okay.
sourcing locally, which shameless plug, our gypsum is produced here in the United States, and so I think those supply chains are going to, which is going to ultimately be better for us as a
Yeah.
nation. I think it's going to be,
Yeah.
reshoring some of this manufacturing. I see some of these fertilizers operations going to be able to come back here, as well as other farm chems, um,
Yeah.
which I'm not a huge fan of, but it is completely necessary um, for where we are in agriculture. So I'm bullish
Amazing.
on, yeah, American
Yeah.
ag inputs and ag products. Um, and then hopefully working things into like hemp into the rotation, so that we can diversify ourselves and we don't have to put all of our eggs in two baskets, and we can diversify and hopefully spur innovation for multiple other different ventures and opportunities, and ultimately hopefully deliver something that's better for the customer as well.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, we're nearing the end of our conversation here, Sean, and I've really appreciated your input and your insights, your perspectives. As I always do, I love to leave the last few minutes for you to get on a bit of a soapbox and tell our audience, what's going on in your community. What are the things that they should be paying attention to? Where are they going to find EcoGem products, not just the gypsum, but your whole portfolio? And if there was one message you'd like to leave for the audience, what might that be? So the floor is yours to share and edify, to your heart's content.
Absolutely. Thank you. And honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure getting a chance to connect. So I really appreciate you inviting me and having me on. And yeah, I'm super excited about gypsum in particular. And I think it's going to be um, really a game changer for helping folks to be more efficient on farm. And I love the fact that we're local, we're here in the United States, and so we can really help in terms of having a good supply, high quality supply at a low cost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, as I alluded to earlier, producers need every break they can possibly get on inputs. And so I'm excited about being able to help and to be able to provide support there. Um, Ways that I think this could be useful that people aren't talking about. One thing is USDA through NRCS has a program called EQIP, which is Environmental Quality Incentives Program. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Many producers are familiar with it, but essentially it provides funding for things that improve environmental quality. And so, not I think a lot of folks should have this on their radar as a way to actually get some of these things paid for. You can create a composting facility that you can have on site on your farm and create compost there. You can get that funded. You can also use 333, which is application of gypsum products. So you can get cost share for gypsum applications. It's going to depend state by state. So talk to your NRCS local office. But I think this could be a good resource for folks to look at to use to try to be more efficient. To utilize some of that money that's going to add to environmental quality that already has been allocated to NRCS to give out to folks so that you can make your operation more efficient and add value to your land long term. Um, so that's one thing that I think folks should keep in their mind. See if they can start to work with NRCS to get EQIP funding to do cost share for their gypsum product applications. Also, applications that I think are interesting are using gypsum in composting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Gypsum has a ton of benefits in terms of reducing some of the environmental issues with composting. One of those is the volatilization of ammonia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it basically will bind with and prevent ammonia from volatilizing. So it keeps more nitrogen in your pile. It will also do the same for phosphorus and prevent phosphorus from leaching, which are two of the larger environmental concerns with composting. So not only are you reducing those environmental concerns, you're also keeping more of those nutrients in your pile with the addition of calcium and sulfur in bioavailable forms. So it really enables you to pretty cheaply create a more efficient compost and a higher quality compost. So that's one vertical that I'm very excited about, and I'm eager to connect with composters or folks that might be composting on site and seeing if they'd like to add gypsum to their process, either during the composting process or maybe mixing it afterwards, or even larger commercial composting operations. Very excited to look at adding gypsum into both the process or as a soil blend or some type of a mix. There's a lot of synergy with the applications as well because both of them go out through a rotary spreader. So by combining both of them, you can put them out and apply them at the same time in a single pass, which is a very efficient way of getting that accomplished. Um, and also for largely for manure management, things like lagoons. Um, CSD is very synergistic with biology because of that soil structure improvement. And so we see when we apply both of these at the same time that they work incredibly well together.
Amazing.
Namely, compost, but also biologicals as well.
Yeah. And where would we find your product?
So you guys can go to eco-gem.com. And so that's our website. We have a little bit of e-commerce. So we do have some direct-to-consumer, smaller 50-pound bags and 10-pound bags if you guys would like to put it on the yard, which I highly recommend. It's awesome, especially in this winter time. If you have little, doggy spots or little, areas or just for your trees, give it a try. go ahead and get some. It ships directly to you. Shipping is included in that price. And so there is a e-commerce direct to consumer component there, but then there's also our phone number. So reach out and connect with us, and I'll be in touch with you, and I can get you guys pricing and look at what it might look like for larger scale deliveries as well.
Amazing. And for those of you listening that are part of the Grow ecosystem, is there potentially a spot where you can acquire EcoGem products within our Grow ecosystem?
Yes, we are on NourishMart, and we are on there. So you can search for EcoGem on NourishMart as well. And you can get access to our 50-pound bags, and then we will also do bulk large orders as well for direct to producers. So I know there's tons of folks, consumers and producers on that site as well. So eager to connect with both.
Amazing. So we'll link your phone number and email, Sean, within our link at the bottom here for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you as an audience have learned a little bit more about gypsum, enjoyed to hear some of Sean's journey and some of the discussion about some interesting crops like hemp and how that is an alternative to some of our constraints with our typical system of crops and even forestry componentry. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversations and maybe having you back on the show in 6-7 months here and seeing where you're at.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Once again, thank you so much, Neil. It was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And I'll be tuning in and sending as many people as I can.
Amazing. Thanks so much. We'll catch everyone on the next episode of Pasture Prime Time. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.